welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. And we have begun Series 2. We are here for the first episode after our month-long break after Super Bowl. We are back as we review the new season coming ahead. And for our first episode, we are going to do a free agency review so far. It's been a week since it started. There's been a few trades, a few free agency acquisitions. And with me, I've got none other than Adam from Franchise Tag Podcast, a returning guest. How are you, Adam?
Yeah, I'm good. It's been, we had a little bit of a dip for a couple of weeks where it kind of went a bit quiet, and then all hell's broken loose as free agency has happened. But yeah, it's all good, all exciting, and you never know. Green Bay fan, we might actually do something at some point, but I doubt it. So.
Well, we will get on to Green Bay in a second because only really one place to start. But before we do that, how's the because you if you're watching this podcast on YouTube or listen to it, you'll know that Adam from the Franchise Tag Podcast. How's that all going?
Yeah, no, it's been really good. We've been doing lots of different stuff. We're doing XFL stuff at the moment. I know Gareth is doing a lot of XFL interviews that he's part of it now, and he's doing a lot with that. We're getting some really big names on from the XFL. We've got a couple of, well, I know that we've definitely got one NFL player coming on that he's doing next week, so that'll be good. So we're trying to get more of that going. We've got the fantasy and the betting show. Obviously we're not doing at the moment because there's no games, but other than that, it's just the regular chat show that we do every week. So yeah, it's all good. There's lots of it happening. Give us a like and a sub and all that sort of stuff. And it's going okay. Actually, at this moment, if you go, I don't know when is this going out?
Um, if I can get out, it might be out tonight, so Friday night, or at the latest Saturday evening.
Okay, so we've actually got a signed Keenan Allen jersey where once we hit 500 subscribers on YouTube, then that will be drawn and someone will win that. All you got to do is just go over to our YouTube page, the Franchise Tag Podcast, and comment on a video and subscribe, and you'll be in and you'll be putting that. And we're at 460 something, I think it is. So we're not too far away. So yeah, if you want one of them, any Chargers fans out there?
Well, I've actually applied as well for that competition. So hint hint, if you want
You're in the
to,
draw.
yeah. So if we can rig it, that would be great.
I'm sure we can do something.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So we may as well start off with the obvious talking point. And as you're a Green Bay fan, it would be remiss to not start the free agency podcast but not talking about Aaron Rodgers. Of course, we are. Of course, these news are coming thick and fast for all different players. And we will keep you updated during the podcast of any news that breaks during it. But of course, the big talking point the whole week. It's been quite an exhausting week, if I'm honest. I'm glad it's sort of over and done with. But the whole week dominated around Aaron Rodgers. Is he going to stay at Green Bay? Is he going to retire? Is he going to be a New York Jet? And that was the only real team that there was talk about this week. He had his darkness retreat. He's out of that. He had the appearance on the Pat McAfee show. And after days of good morning football, doing the same sort of intro, same talking points, we finally got some sort of an answer from Aaron Rodgers that he wants to be a New York Jet. Now, I don't know whether it was on my podcast or another one where you mentioned, I think it was last offseason, that you actually would like to see him traded to get value for him. And has your opinion changed this last year, or you, after his disastrous year, really last year, has your opinion even further stamped on him that it's a good decision that he's going to be going?
I think really it's pretty much the same as what it was. I was very much when in the off season last season, it was very much sort of like thought of that the Broncos were going to come in for him. They'd just taken Nathaniel Hackett as their head coach, and you kind of felt like that was what was going to happen, and they were going to go for him. It didn't happen. They went for Russell Wilson. The Seahawks got all the goodies, the draft picks and all that for him. And that was the deal, really, that for me, I felt that was the right time. And that was the deal that they should have gone for and got. I still feel that trading him away is the way forward. Like you said, this week with free agency has been exhausting, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers and just the last 3 or 4 years, it has just been exhausting. It really has. And it just feels like you just can't do anything right by this guy now. It's like he's decided the media's wrong, the Packers are wrong, everyone's wrong. And it's just reached that point where it's like, you kind of have to do what Aaron wants because that's how it works, and there's just no other way around it. He's come out and said that he was 90% sure that he was going to retire before he went into the darkness, and then he came out and had basically decided that he was going to play, but didn't like the fact that basically the Packers had been saying things about trying to trade him, and it's just a little bit like it's NFL, mate. It's what happens. It's like it is. It's all of them. And don't get me wrong, I know that he is a legend for the franchise, and he is certainly within the top three players that they've ever had. But I just think it's one of them things where it's like no matter where you are or what age you're at, they're always going to be looking for value. That's just what it is. And I think that now's the time where he probably, he's come out and said he wants to go to the Jets. Um, we want to trade him to the Jets. I think it's just a matter of them hammering out some sort of compensation for him. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I think they won't be getting anything like the Russell Wilson or the Matthew Stafford trades, which have happened in the previous years. It's just not going to happen for a guy of that age. But he does have some ability, and it does obviously push them into a position where they should be looking for a Super Bowl. So you do sort of think that, they're going to have to pay something. But I think the idea of a couple of firsts, I think, is just a bit crazy.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that you're looking at the fact that no one else wants him really apart from the Jets. I think that again affects the value. I think performances last season affect that as well, and of course his age. But it's one thing I found most frustrating about this was that he moaned for years and years about the fact that he hadn't got the help he wanted. He hasn't got the receivers. But the talk out this week about how he wants Mercedes Lewis, Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard, and so he wants these three players that he had with the Packers, and top of that he wants a guy who, from what we're hearing from rumours, are that he's got one of the worst knees they've ever seen in Odell Beckham, a player that really I think should have retired after the Super Bowl because what a great way to end. So I just don't get. I mean, we'll get into what he does for the Jets, but I think from Rodgers' point of view, I mean, it just seems a bit odd to me that he's gone from a guy who moans about for years and years about not having the receivers. We want a first round receiver in the draft every year, constantly moaning about it, and then he gets he gets what he wants to get to move away, and he wants the same players that he wants his mates basically.
Yeah, I think from his point of view, he's probably looking at it as though he wants some people in the locker room with him who he knows has got the experience and is going to help him out, make a difference, but essentially do what he wants. I mean, it's kind of like Nathaniel Hackett as well. It's like they come out, he comes out and goes that he's got a great relationship with Hackett, and it in the nicest possible way. It's because Hackett in Green Bay would let him do what he wanted to do when he was out there. LaFleur was calling a lot of the plays. Um, More often than not, what would happen is that Rodgers would look at it and would see something else, something had changed, and come out with another one. And his OC was more than happy with that because, we saw what Hackett was like when calling the plays in Denver. It wasn't great. So, I think that there is that sort of understanding between the two that he will give a lot of freedom to Rodgers. And so I think with that helps. I think having these players who obviously are friends of his or kind of like maybe certainly in Lazard's case as a younger player coming in who wasn't I think he was undrafted actually. I'm not quite sure, but that to a certain extent there's probably a version of them that actually idolize this guy as well, and so they will do everything they can in order to help him and things like that. Maybe they look at Garrett Wilson as being the sort of Devonte Adams kind of player, and then you've got the rest that it did work to a certain extent with the Packers for that, and I think that's what he's probably looking at. But yeah, I mean, he probably just wants his guys around him, and it happens a lot, doesn't it, in the NFL? It's no real shocker.
Yeah, I mean, no more so than Brady and Gronk.
Yeah.
In terms of the Jets, of course, this is a team that finished 7-9. I mean, the obvious one position was to quarterback. We all saw the struggles that the many quarterbacks they had, particularly Zach Wilson, had there. I mean, looking at the stats, looking at the four quarterbacks that played from last year, so you got Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, Mike White, and Chris Trevor. Only one of these four quarterbacks had more touchdowns and interceptions. So Zach Wilson had 6 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Joe Flacco was that one guy. He had 5 touchdowns, 3 picks. Mike White, who's just joined the Dolphins, 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Then Trevor got 0 for both. So obviously they had the defensive rookie of the year in Sauce Gardner, offensive rookie of the year in Garrett Wilson, which, from my opinion, should have been one of the other two. But they've got some great weapons. They've had a great draft. So you got Alan Lazard alongside Garrett Wilson and everyone else. You got Breece Hall, who was a contender for Rookie of the Year before his injury. The running back, he had a great first year. The defense has been brilliant. So really, in what is really a very tight AFC, but also tight AFC East, how far do you see the Jets going? Do you think that they could make the playoffs, or do you think they could be a victim of their division, or do you think they could go all the way and go a long way in the postseason?
I think if they had had a semi-competent quarterback in that team, then I think they would have been in the playoffs. That defense would have got them that far. Like I say, any sort of semi-competent quarterback play would have been great. I think if they had managed to keep Breece Hall fit, then he was Rookie of the Year, just waiting to happen until he went down, and of course he missed so much time. So that was the problem there. They've got the players. The defense is very, very strong. It's one of the best in the league, not the best, but one of the probably top 5 defense, to be honest. And the offense, Garrett Wilson's been great. Breece Hall, if he can come back fit, if you can get someone like Aaron Rodgers in there as well, like I say, they were not far away from being a playoff team. They should have been a playoff team if they'd had a half decent quarterback. I've seen people have come out. I saw someone, I can't remember who it was, fairly well, respected name, coming out and putting them second in the AFC behind the Chiefs. I just feel like I don't think this is going to work in that respect. I just don't think they're going to get there. It's such a loaded conference. It's so difficult in the AFC. You've got the Chiefs, you've got the Bengals, you've got the Bills. It's just there's so much there. You've got the Jags who are up and coming as well. It's going to be tough. I think you're going to have to beat. They're not even going to be favourites for their division. I wouldn't have thought, because of the Bills. I think if they don't win that division, you're gonna have to beat 2 of the 3 out of the Bills, the Bengals, and the Chiefs in order to get to a Super Bowl. It's going to be very, very tough in order to do that. And there's still other teams as well that you don't even mention that are going to be tough to beat as well. And to me, I think he's still a very, very good quarterback. Of course he is, but he's not the Aaron Rodgers of sort of 5-6 years ago. He just isn't. And so I think because of that, it's going to be very difficult. They're definitely a playoff team. They should be. To take on a quarterback like this at his age and they will give up some draft capital for him. To do that, it's a Super Bowl move. It's an all-in move. And so you kind of feel like if they don't get there, it is a bit of a loss for them, and it just wouldn't have worked out to the way they want. Whatever he wants, the organisation of the Jets will be thinking, this is our time. This is our time to really make an impression. And so they have to be looking at championship games and Super Bowls and stuff like that.
It does make you wonder a little bit, as in why you'd want to move from the Packers to go to an AFC. For everything you said, then about the fact that you've got the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Dolphins, and even the Patriots in their division, they've still got Belichick as head coach. You've got the Steelers, I think, will improve again this year. You've got Denver Broncos, I think, will be better under Sean Payton. You've got the Chargers. You've got all these great teams. Whereas the NFC, look at the difference in quarterback. The best quarterback is Hurts, you'd say, but after that, it's Goff, Stafford, and so it's not. It does make you wonder a little bit. He's probably had a better chance of making Super Bowl, really, with the Packers in a way because he's got a you say a better head coach. You've got well, if you had Tonyan last year, you had Aaron Jones. You've got all the players he wants to bring into the Packers at wide receiver. Then you've got the defense, which is questionable, but it was questionable last year. So that's the one difference he has, I suppose, compared to the now going with the Jets. But it just makes you wonder. But talking of NFC quarterbacks, I mean, to now this is now the time for Jordan Love to step up. He's had 3 years in the waiting. First round pick in 2020, I believe was the lockdown draft. How do you see his first year going? Because they've gone from a seamless transition from Hall of Fame quarterback in Brett Favre to Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. Now, Love, big shoes to fill, of course. That's two very big shoes to fill. Not everyone can be that same level, even after sitting for 3 years. So, in terms of Jordan Love, do you think this year is just going to be a case of just no real pressure, just take it how it comes, and just basically learning on the job?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, everyone forgets what Rodgers was like that first year that he came in. They went on I think it was 7-9, 6-10, that kind of record when in his first full year of playing. It's not. It wasn't quite as easy as what everyone likes to make it believe that it was when now that you look back on it. And also after that first year, no one was going, this guy is going to be a Hall of Famer. No one was thinking that. So I think you have to give Love all the time you can this year. I think it's going to be a case of he's going to be there. He's going to play as many games as we can get him to play. And yeah, you just got to give him time. And, they've got a decent couple of young receivers in Watson and Dobbs. And, they might bring in other people through the draft. It would make sense for them to go young, like maybe like a young tight end. They might draft one of them, which I know they're rumored to. And I think that's probably the way forward for the offense. And, I think they're just going to have to suck it up. And it might take a year or two. He might not be any good. He might not be any good. You just don't know until you get him out there playing game week in, week out. You just have no idea. And, I remember doing the preview on your show before the start of the season just gone, and we were all pretty confident and stuff like that. Do it this one, I wouldn't even be able to know where to start. I mean, because you just don't know what you got with him. That's the thing. It's like so, and until you see him playing in games, it's going to be near impossible to come out with any sort of prediction as to what he's going to be able to do.
Yeah, and it's a very hard division as well to call because Bears have just gone crazy this first week. We'll get onto them in a little bit, but the Vikings improved last year. For me, they've got a game-changing move in getting Brian Flores as their DC, and then the Lions had a great year, and really Moses would have made the playoffs with that record. So it is going to be I think it could go one or two ways. It could either be this guy's a real deal. He's going to come in and because he had that one game where he looked comfortable last year, albeit small sample size. But you've got that where he looks. It'll either be where he's really really good, or he's going to have a real difficult first year. But at the same time, I think he's still very young. So I think even if he has a difficult year, I think it's not really no real time to start. Calling for him to be traded away or anything. I think he needs, as you say, he needs time. He needs time.
Yeah, I mean that is what it is. It's just going to be give him the time, give him the game time, see how he does. They're going to give him the 5th-year option. They're going to do that, which means that basically you've got him for 2 years. So see what he does in 2 years. If it doesn't work in the 2 years, you look to draft someone else. If it does work, happy days. That is essentially what it is. So I think we'll just have to wait and see when it comes to Jordan.
Yeah, I agree totally. Right, we'll move on to our second topic. But before we do that, just some news that's come out today in the NFL. Leonard Fournette has been released by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Great time there. Of course, won a Super Bowl. Playoff Lenny was given a nickname. So he's now been released. Jalen Mills has been released from the Patriots after his move from the Eagles. The Bills have released Isaiah McKenzie. Other news, one that breaks my heart is that Mike Gesicki, my favorite Dolphins player, or was, until very recently, he's now moved to the New England Patriots, which is a move that shocked me gone to our rivals. Cowboys re-signed Cooper Rush. And I think that Devin Bush has gone to the Seahawks. And that is pretty much. Oh, and also the Colts have signed Gardner Minshew, and Eagles have signed his replacement in Marcus Mariota as his backup. So the biggest real talking about this week that had a lot of headlines was Lamar Jackson, and most years this would be the biggest one. Of course, he has been put on the franchise tag, the exclusive franchise tag, which means that they can receive trade offers and he can shop around and look for a different team. But as it stands, where we're going with 5 days into the first week of free agency, nothing seems to have happened. And there's been a lot of talk about NFL owners colluding over Lamar Jackson. Whole narrative about his injury record hasn't been great the last couple of years, his injury record. But in terms of, I mean, it's been a massive mess and he seems to have betted on his career. And so far, it's not really working out, unlike with Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott. But for you, Adam, where do you see Lamar Jackson suiting up for come week one in the 2023 NFL season?
It's a really difficult one. We were talking about this actually on Tuesday night when we did our show, and I actually can see him not suiting up at all. He's stuck on this franchise tag, which he clearly doesn't want to be on. He wants a deal which he feels that, Deshaun Watson got his deal of what he got. Why can't I get something similar? I think we can all safely say that that was very much an outlier of a deal, and that you're not going to find many other NFL quarterbacks on that. It probably, to a certain extent, it probably is a little bit of collusion. To be honest, they've probably all spoken to each other and they've all gone out and said, yeah, let's make sure we don't do this again. So I do think that there is a bit of that in it. But it's really difficult with Lamar because he's missed 33% of the last games, 33% of games in the last 2 seasons because of injury. That's a hell of a lot of games to miss. I mean, I know it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to do it every year, but when it's the last two, it does make you worry that it is going to be an ongoing thing. That's 6 out of 18. So you're not getting in the playoffs. Or if you are getting in the playoffs, you've done really, really well in the first 12 games, but then you're not going to get the number one seed. And you're in the AFC, which we've just said is really, really tough. And you're going to end up playing these teams without your starting quarterback. And that is just a really big problem. To me, it screams Atlanta. It really does. It feels like that is the obvious place that he should be going to. They need a quarterback. They're going to be, at the moment, what it looks like, they're going to be starting the season with Desmond Ridder. It doesn't feel like they're going to be going quarterback in the draft. So it just kind of feels a little bit like that's the obvious place for him to go. And he kind of wants to go there as well. That's the other thing. It's his hometown, isn't it? He wants to be from around, be playing for them. And so it does just kind of feel like it's the obvious fit. But, I just don't see anyone coming out and giving him like a 4-year, 200 million guaranteed deal. It's just not going to happen. So all the time he doesn't have an agent and he's got it in his head that he deserves a similar deal, nothing's going to happen. Obviously he's going to be back in Baltimore if he doesn't move anywhere, but does he really want to be playing on the franchise tag where he could get injured seriously and that could be it? And there's no sort of guarantees afterwards. And I just feel like that's the problem. He's kind of backing himself. And I think he just feels like until I get that big offer, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, and I think it could easily be a case of like a Le'Veon Bell situation where a guy sits out for a year and then never really recovers. But I do think Lamar Jackson has a much better personality than Le'Veon Bell. I think he's I don't think he'll go down that route, and I think that I'm surprised the Jets are going for him because he's 13 years younger than Aaron Rodgers. You've got a franchise quarterback there. If he's fit, he is a franchise quarterback, and I think his passing is underrated. I think he is better than people say in that sense. But I think that one team that I don't think they will because they just paid their quarterback. But I think one team I think would be perfect for him, a run first offense, Seattle. I think Pete Carroll would love him. I think that whilst I don't think Pete Carroll will be there for 10, 13 years, I think he'll probably leave in the next, will retire in the next 5, 10 years. But I do think that would be a perfect situation for him in that sense because I think 11. But I think they're set with Gino for now. They could even draft someone in this year's draft. But yeah, I think Atlanta is the obvious spot because they got Taylor Heineke, who's also from Atlanta, I believe, as well as Desmond Ridder. But Desmond Ridder is he your guy? I know he's not really had much of a chance yet, but I think that if you can get someone like Lamar Jackson, 26 years old, I doubt the Cardinals regret moving on from Josh Rosen, and I do think that if they see Lamar Jackson available, I'm surprised they haven't gone for him because he would be absolutely perfect for Atlanta. That system there, a bit similar to Seattle, in terms of they like to run the ball as well. So I think that it would be an amazing, not good for Tyler Algier fancy's worth if Lamar Jackson goes there. Apologies if I pronounced his name completely wrong there, but I think Lamar Jackson for me, I think he'll end up playing for Baltimore. I think they'll pay whether it's this year, whether it's next year. I can see him just staying there because I think that I saw talk of a trade between Kirk Cousins and Lamar Jackson. They're going for more Joe Flacco style quarterback, whereas Vikings are going for a bit more of like a bit more of a running quarterback. But I think either way, I think Baltimore would be stupid personally to get rid of him because there's not many better available that they could get. So for me, yeah, I think Lamar Jackson should stay in Baltimore. Whether he will, I'm not sure. Now, next thing really is just the main sort of team that's dominated this week is a Chicago Bears. Of course, they had the first overall pick, which they traded away to the Panthers. They got a massive haul. They still have the number 9th overall pick as a result, and they got DJ Moore as a result of that. I mean, that's a brilliant trade for me personally. They did the right thing, pulling the plug and getting it done. Other people have come in this week. Tremaine Edmonds, a linebacker, a 4-year deal, brilliant player. TJ Edwards has come in. PJ Walker has come in, of course, a guy that knows DJ Moore well. Of course, one of the plays of last season for the Panthers. Them two reunited. You got Nate Davis, the lineman from the Titans, DeMarcus Walker, Travis Homer, the former Seattle Seahawks running back, Andrew Billings, defensive lineman, Robert Tonyan, you'll know very well, Adam, the former Green Bay Packers tight end, and former Panthers running back Donta Foreman. So it really is a Panthers dominated offseason for the Bears if you include the players and the trade pick. And yeah, so for that one, I mean, of course, they're a team in your division, a team that were terrible last year, 3-13 or 3-14, whatever they were. And with that now, all the trade pick, all the first round of free agency, first week of free agency moves. Do they worry you going into the season? How well do you think they can do this season?
I think when you look at all the deals that they've done, you just sort of see all the names that they've brought in. It feels very sort of Jacksonville from last year. That's kind of what it feels like. It feels like they've gone for it and they've made big money moves. I like quite a lot of the moves. I think they are decent moves. Obviously, DJ Moore, getting him in that trade was. The funny thing was, we put a tweet out basically saying who do you feel's won the trade and all that sort of thing. And everyone went Chicago. Everyone went Chicago had won that trade between them and Carolina. When you actually look at some of the older trades, the one that the 49ers did, I can't remember who it was with, but they did in order to draft Trey Lance. It's a very similar amount. What Carolina paid was just what you pay to move from like 9th to 1st. It's what you do. The reason I think a lot of people felt that it was just that little bit more was having DJ Moore attached to it as well. And he's a great receiver, and he's kind of had a bit of a rough time in Carolina because he just hasn't had that main quarterback. I think everyone felt like it was going to be Cam Newton and he was going to be able to stick around. It didn't happen, and they haven't really replaced, and that's the problem. So I think they did well because of the getting DJ Moore. It's a genuine wide receiver one on that team. You've got Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet. Now you've got Robert Tonyan as well as your second tight end. You've got Chase Claypool, of course, from last year. That's another one. So you got some really good players there. They have lost David Montgomery, which is a bit of a shame. But at the same time, they've actually, I feel they've replaced all right. Donta Foreman is not a bad running back to have at all. You've got Travis Homer, who can be sort of like your third string because you've got Khalil Herbert. So, Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, they're all good names. Tremaine Edmonds, I can't believe they paid 72 million for Tremaine Edmonds. I must say, I think it's way over. But at the same time, that's like what Jacksonville had. I think when teams know that you've got money, or more to the point, players and agents know that you've got money, they're going to try and get as much of it as they can. So that's why it's done. So they might have had to pay over the odds for some of these guys. But they're good players. That's the thing. They are good players, and they've been good players in all the teams that they've played for before. So it stands to reason they'd be good again. So I think they've done really well in respect of who they've brought in. Am I worried about them? I don't think they'll be winning the division. I don't think we'll be winning the division, so it's not really going to be a problem for us. But I think there's two teams that are more better equipped at the moment to win that division. Having said that, give it 2 or 3 years. This is the thing. They've set themselves at almost like a lot of these contracts are kind of longer contracts. They're like 2, 3, 4 year deals. Like Tremaine Edmonds is a 4 year deal. I know some of them can be a bit funny years and stuff like that, and it's just money being pushed out. But these guys can sort of move on. So they're obviously not looking for this season coming up. They're thinking in the future. Problem with that is so are the Lions. So, this is the thing. You've got both of them kind of doing the same thing at the same time. I think probably still the Vikings would be the main one for the division. But yeah, I mean they've done really well and they've brought in some really good people. I don't think they've done anything particularly special when it comes to the trade. I just think that's the price that it is when you get it, and they just happen to have the number one pick because the Houston Texans went mental in the last game, and that's pretty much it. To be honest, I think they've lucked out into the first pick, and they've done what they should do. That Ryan Poles has done what he should do as a general manager. He's sold it for a hell of a lot, and now he can bring in some really good young players with that. They've got a first, a second, and then a first and a second next year from it, I think.
I
So
think, yeah, I think it was first round pick from I think it's a first round pick from next year and maybe a second round as well. It's been so long. It feels like so
yes.
long since they did that trade. I've forgotten what the things were. I'm trying to find it, but I mean, in
So
terms of
they've got a so the ninth pick in this one, a second rounder to go with they've already got a second round as well, so they'll have two second rounds. So one first, 2 seconds in this one. 2024 they'll have two firsts, and then 2025 they'll have another second. So yeah, I mean they've got themselves 3 years worth of draft picks there that can really do well for them.
yeah, exciting times for all Bears fans. Shout out to Luke.
Well, let's not let them get too excited. I mean,
Yeah, I mean that actually I think is one of the most exciting divisions. I think I'm really intrigued by the NFC North. I think you've got at least three, if not four teams, if Lev is the guy there. I think it's going to be that in the AFC is going to be. I think going to be the two divisions that everyone's going to be watching this year. Before we do head to break, quick word on the Panthers. Of course, they're the ones that have the first overall pick, gave away all that capital. Thoughts on them? Because they've added, Hayden Hurst, Miles Sanders, and they've also got the number one overall pick, which at the moment, which you would all but think is going to be a quarterback. But the question is, who's he going to throw to? Apart from Hurst, I mean, Moore's gone. Anderson had a good 1 year there; he's gone. Yeah, who's he going to throw to? Whoever it is that they pick.
yeah, it is a difficult one, isn't it? Obviously, like you say, they've brought in Hayden Hurst. I do actually like the signings they've made. I like Hayden Hurst as a tight end. I like Miles Sanders as a running back. I think that's a good move. They've re-signed a couple of good players, and they've brought in like Von Bell and Shai Tutu on the defense. So you've got yourself some decent guys there. But I think the biggest issue for them is, like you say, who's he going to throw it to? They've got a second round pick. I'd be surprised if they didn't go wide receiver on that. But yeah, it's difficult. There isn't anyone there. It's Laviska Shenault, I think, is there, and they've
Nice.
got Terrace Marshall, I think, is
Yeah.
there. It's not good. it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be a big rebuild, isn't it? That's the whole point. It's going to take time, and I think they'll probably go pretty wide receiver heavy in the draft. Maybe get say like two or three, and just try and go with what they can, and then try and work it out in the years to come and stuff like that. I think that's the only way they're going to be able to do it because otherwise it's going to be near impossible, I think, for them to do much. But yeah, I mean they've still got some players that'll be all right, but I don't think they'll be winning anything anytime soon. So.
No, but I think since a bad division, I think they could still win division, even with a losing
Yeah,
record. That's how bad the division is. Of course, if you want my thoughts, more of my thoughts on this trade, you can catch my article for Adam's company and the franchise tag online. You can get all my reactions to that trade. I think I did it last weekend. So yeah, if you want to check out a written version of my thoughts, then do check it out. But we are going to head to a break. In this break, you will hear just what other podcasts you can look forward to in our Eurotrips network this week.
Andy, we haven't heard from you yet. What's your thoughts on what we've seen and especially Liverpool's exit from the competition?
Yeah, I think for me, the word I'd use for that game against Madrid was, I think, outclassed. I think that Madrid are better in every level, particularly I think second half especially, they were by far the better team. I think they really controlled the second half. I think there were moments in the first half where they looked a bit shaky. You had the Nunes chance. You had, I think, there's a chance that fell to Jota, which he should have scored, which I think Jota would have scored the Jota of a year ago, a year and a half ago. So I think that certainly, I think there was a point, maybe the first 25 minutes of the game where you thought we got a chance here. And I think that certainly went into half time 0-0, thinking if we can get a goal early on second half, you only need two more. And welcome back. But we will head back to the episode, and of course, we just mentioned the NFC South. One of the big movements, as well as Derek Carr, before the week started, was the news that Tampa Bay have signed on a one-year deal Tom Brady's replacement in Baker Mayfield. I mean, for me personally, I think it's not a bad deal because I think he showed himself to do well in a good system. I don't think Todd Bowles is a good head coach, which may be his downfall. But at the same time, I think that there's only $6 million 1 year deal, so it's not too much of a risk if he is bad. Because I know it's Kyle Trask and Blaine Gabbert, but I think at the same time, I think that I know he's retired, but they could easily go back to him for one final ride. But I think if he does that for a third time, I think that will really kill the term retire. And I think that will extinct it forever. But Baker Mayfield, I think, is interesting because he obviously had a difficult time with Carolina and his final year in Cleveland. But of course, his best year really came the year they made the playoffs for the first time in so many years. Under, I think, who still is a good head coach in Stefanski and good coaching. And I think that he struggled in Carolina, bad coaching, did well in Tampa Bay, in Los Angeles, great coaching, McVay, despite the record they had last year. But for you, do you see, because Todd Bowles he's proved himself to be a good coordinator, but not yet a good head coach. He proved that at the Jets, and he's proved it so far on the Buccaneers. Do you think we're going to see the Los Angeles Rams version of Baker Mayfield in Tampa, or are we going to see the Carolina Panthers version of Baker Mayfield?
I think you're probably looking at just a bad version of Baker Mayfield now, I'm afraid. It's just not, it's not the guy that you had in Cleveland at the beginning. It just isn't, for whatever reason. He just, I think everyone hoped he would be better, and it's just not that. To me, this feels like very much a 1 year. We need to get a veteran in. Blaine Gabbert, we know can't really do much because he's been around forever. We haven't played Kyle Trask. I reckon you'll probably find that Trask will play at some point this season just because they'll want to see what they've got with him. And I think Baker will probably do okay. But that team is in big rebuild. Like, it really is in big rebuild now. You said that Leonard Fournette has gone, so that's one that they've lost now. Running back, they brought in Chase Edmonds, which, yeah, I mean, it's not great. I've fallen for that in fantasy before. So yeah, that it's not brilliant. they re-signed Levante David a couple of days ago, so that's good because it's someone who's experienced, who knows what he's doing in the back in the defense. But they're just, I don't know. I don't see a lot happening there now. I think, it was very much we're all in with Brady. We'll see what we can get. They got their Super Bowl win, and now they're going to pay for it. Is essentially what it is, and that's just kind of how it goes. It's, obviously Baker was the number one pick when he got drafted, and it's surprising what's happened, but I kind of almost feel like he hasn't quite got this. He's not quite at this position yet, but I feel like he's becoming very Fitzpatrick, very Fitzpatrick. And I can just see him dotting around different teams as starters just to sort of like cover them for that season, and then another team for another season just to help them out. And he'll pick up these deals where he'll get like, I think it said 4 million in guarantees, so he'll keep doing that and for the 1 years, and I think he'll do okay. He'll win you games. You will get a few wins out of him, but I think you'll end up in a position where it will just slip off during the season. But then that's not so bad because you can just bring in your rookie quarterback and see how they do, and then it doesn't work and you move on to another team and sort of dot his way around the league. So that's kind of what I see from him now. But yeah, I think the Bucks are just in a bit of a mess now, and I don't know with Todd Bowles. I think he might just be one of these guys, and there's lots of them out there who are really, really good coordinators and then are not very good head coaches, and it's just what it is. They're just not used to being the main man, but they're really good at being in charge of one particular section, which, like we were saying about Nathaniel Hackett, in a way, maybe he's just a good offensive coordinator, but when it comes to actually managing everything, he just can't do it.
Yeah, and I think we'll see the same thing as Bill O'Brien at Patriots now. Of course, we all know what happened with him in Houston. Of course, Vic Fangio now is a DC in Miami, which is I'm very excited about. And I think that we're seeing a lot of actually old coordinators, but at the same time you get some that never recover. Adam Gase is one. Patricia is falling into that trap as well. They never quite recover from that failed head coaching role. So I think we'll see. I think it'll go either one of those ways for all these new coordinators that have come from head coaching roles. Our final discussion before we go on a little bit of a fun topic at the end is the Lions. Now, they're a team that I had making the playoffs last year, and they almost proved me right at the end. One of the stars of their real run and their great second half of the year was Jamal Williams, their running back, who was, had so many touchdowns. I believe he was the rushing touchdowns leader last season. But they've replaced him with David Montgomery, and he's gone to New Orleans. To presuming he may well start if Alvin Kamara has gets in trouble, and they've gone Montgomery. I think is a good running back, but I don't think it's worth it's what you get rid of Jamal Williams for. So I think so. For me, I was surprised by the move to get rid of Jamal Williams because he felt like a real heartbeat of that Lions team. All that they were doing well in that second half, albeit a lot of them were sort of red zone touchdowns, etc., etc. But at the same time, he felt like the heartbeat of the team. He felt like a perfect running back for Dan Campbell. He felt like he was a perfect guy Dan Campbell would love. So I'm just very surprised that he was moved on. What were your thoughts on that move to replace Jamal Williams with Montgomery?
Yeah, it does feel like a strange one. I mean, Jamal Williams is older, so I'm just wondering if that's what it is. He's a couple of years older. They feel very similar, like as in the type of running back they are. They're kind of sort of like, they're not the sort of pass catching running backs. They're just sort of like really just ram it down the middle kind of running back. So to me, it feels as a similar thing. I think that they've spent a bit more money on Montgomery. I think the thing with Jamal Williams is what we saw with him in Green Bay is that he is a character, and he's definitely a sort of like a locker room leader. He can be that, and probably a fun person to be around in the locker room. I just think that there is a limit to what you get from him, and I know that sounds really, really strange given the fact that he got the most touchdowns from a running back. But I think it is just that when you look, they were all within 5 yards of, and that's the thing. It's like you're not going to get any big sort of breakaway plays from him. Now, you could argue you've got DeAndre Swift and that you should sort of like, just go down the same route and keep it as the same. But I think they've probably looked at it and thought that Montgomery is just a slightly better running back compared to what Williams is and what Williams has shown over his whole career. I think Williams showed that he was good last year, but that's pretty much where it was. I mean, when he was at the Packers, he was okay. Like we all sort of thought he was all right, but he was one of them players where you'd come out and go, "Oh no, you want to keep him there because you like him." And that's not necessarily the best reason to keep a player just because you like him, sort of thing. You want the best player. So I think they might look at this as a bit of an upgrade compared to Williams over time as well. Like I say, it's a 3-year deal. They've got their running back set for 3 years there now. And I think that's probably what they're looking at. In 3 years' time, Williams will be 30. So I just think that's all it is. It's just moving money around and going for a slightly better option.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If I can't really argue with that, I think that you're right. I think you see a lot of players have these good years, and then especially players who are on their contract years. For example, I think Mike Davis was the most recent example I can think of, where some players have these great years, and then that is it. And especially in a position that is devaluing, I think that I can see why. Even looking at the deals the running backs are getting, nowhere near what the quarterbacks are getting, nowhere near what even the linebackers and defensive backs are getting these days. So I think it is it is a position that is sadly losing value. Right, our final question for you, Adam. I have given you the prep beforehand, but we're going to ask you as well as myself, who had the best week so far in free agency? Which teams had the worst? So starting off with you, Adam, who for you has had the best week of free agency so far this year?
I just say finding the best was really, really hard because I was just making holes in all of them and going, yeah, that's not very good. That's not very good. I like what this is really bad because I've been saying all last year I was going on about them, and I do feel like they've done pretty well again. I quite like what the Eagles have done. I like the fact that they've basically re-signed Bradbury and Slay. I mean, it was a very odd situation where we kind of felt like they were both going at one point, and now they're both signed up, and they're both signed up for 3-year deals. And the way that it was done last year was it all felt like it was a 1 year, let's go for it, let's try and win this year. But bringing in these two corners back and they're both on 3-year deals, I think is great. Brandon Graham coming back's good. Fletcher Cox is brilliant coming back for another year. Jason Kelsey coming back for another year. They lost Javon Hargrave. Now that's a big loss, but he is 30. He is getting on a little bit. And they've got 2 first-round picks, so they can do that, and they will still have Fletcher Cox there to basically help them out and kind of like bring them along. You got Jordan Davis, who they drafted last year, so I think that they've done pretty well. Rashad Penny, I like Rashad Penny. I know Freddie's not keen, but I do quite like Rashad Penny. If you can keep him on the field, that's the biggest problem with Rashad Penny. So if you can keep him fit, that's good. Really cheap deal. Re-signed Boston Scott. You got Kenny Gainwell, so they got 3 running backs despite losing Miles Sanders. I think they've done pretty well. We did mention the Bears, of course. Everything that the Bears have done has been pretty good, and the Panthers as well. I think although they haven't bought in loads of players, I feel like they've brought in players that are kind of decent quality, like your Hayden Hurst at tight end and Miles Sanders as well. So I do like them ones. I think they've done well. But the Eagles, for me, just because it was a different team that we hadn't spoken about as well. So I think they've done pretty well. There's quite a few. Like I say, there isn't anyone who I feel like has really knocked it out the park. But I just feel like the Eagles have done well to really bring back a lot of their players.
Yeah, I think certainly before they brought back Slay, I think that you could potentially look at them as not having a great one because I think Hargrave's a big loss, and I think that even though Kelsey's re-signed, Fletcher Cox has come back, they are old, but at the same time, I think getting back Bradbury and Slay, as he likes to be called, I think is a great move for them. I like the 49ers, what they've done, because they've not really lost anyone on defense, and they've added a great player in Javon Hargrave. For me, I think I have to give it to the Bears. I think they've just transformed their franchise. If you look at the draft picks they've given away. You look at everything you mentioned in the first part of the show. I think for me, the Bears, for me, have had the best free agency. The worst, and I'll go first because I want to get your reaction on this, Adam. It's your team, the Packers, because they've lost Lazard, they've lost Tanya, and they're losing Rodgers, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world. But unless I'm wrong, have they added anyone apart from Keyshawn Nixon, who was a great punt returner, kick returner this year? Have they added anyone else to their team? And I think that they've still got, who have they got to throw to apart from Watson and Dobbs? I think they've still got Aaron Jones, so fair enough. But I just think that they've not really done anything. I don't think so far apart from stall this Aaron Rodgers fiasco.
We have added Matt Orzek, the long snapper, to a 3-year contract. That's what we've done. So actually, under worst free agents for me, I have got them down as just not really doing anything. But I feel like sometimes that doesn't mean that it's the worst. Sometimes doing nothing is actually the right thing to do when it comes to your team. When it comes to the wide receivers, obviously it is Watson and Dobbs are the main guys. I think they're going to go and get a tight end in the draft. There's been a lot of talk about Michael Mayer in the first round, but I don't know if they'll go that. I mean, it would be quite funny the first year that as soon as Rodgers go, that they actually draft a receiver in the first round. That would be quite funny. But I don't think they will do it. But I think I could see them going for maybe someone like a Darnell Washington in the second round, something like that. I could see that happening. I think they have Torre as well, who was a 7th round pick, who kind of actually looked half decent. He just didn't really get a lot of game time, so I think he might be okay. Like I say, it's not great because they haven't really done a lot, but there are a few other teams that I think are just as bad. I think the Chargers haven't really done much. I was a little surprised by that. I think the Bucks haven't really done much, but they're in a full rebuild, so that's probably why. I have to say, because I always moan about the Raiders, I don't get what they're doing. I don't understand.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
What they're doing is just bizarre to me. They've brought in a quarterback who is, I would argue, worse than the quarterback they had. The only reason that I get why they've done it, because he's cheaper over time, he is, but it just seems a bit strange. You brought in Jacoby Myers, who to me, I just think is Hunter Renfrow. Like, you've already got him. I don't know why you need another slot receiver, so that seems strange. You've let Darren Waller go, which I kind of can see why you've done it, because it is a bit like of an injury-prone tight end, but it seems a little strange. So I don't really get what they're doing, to be honest. But then I always moan about them, so that's just me moaning about them. But the one that I genuinely don't understand, and this is who I'd say is the worst, and they've actually probably been one of the busiest teams, and they did something similar a couple of years ago, and it didn't really do anything, and I don't really think it's going to do anything again, is the Houston Texans. I don't quite know what they are trying to achieve with this, and it feels very much like the Patriots of 2 years ago, but the names aren't that good. So they've brought in Case Keenum to be a backup on a 2-year deal, $6 million. Noah Brown, 1-year deal, $2 million. Robert Woods, 2-year deal, $10 million. Andrew Beck, 2-year deal, $6 million. They're all very small contracts for players that aren't really that good or are past it. That's the thing. It's like in the defense, they've brought in like Chase Winovich, Sheldon Rankins. They're all older guys, and there's no real look to the future here. It's all just kind of like, and that feels strange because, they're number 2 in the draft. It feels like they're probably going to go quarterback because it hasn't really worked with Davis Mills. So it'd be surprising if they didn't. You'd think you'd want to kind of go to the future or maybe bring in just some good players. And it just kind of all feels a little bit like, why did you, like Sheldon Rankins, 1-year, $10 million contract. Sheldon Rankins is a good defensive lineman, but it's a lot of money for 1 year. It just feels strange.
You think in a way it's almost because I think the Bengals were a big benefit of this is that you get there. I think we'll see the Texans get a quarterback, whether it's Stroud or Young, whoever they take as number two. I don't think. Do you think maybe it's all because we saw the Bengals, albeit it's down to an injury, but the Bengals really benefited from Burrow being injured that first year because it allowed them to get a high draft pick again to get Jamar Chase, and that's where their future. So, do you think maybe it's a thing where it's a look at maybe not have Stroud or Young sit out for a year or sit behind Case Keenum, have them struggle again for 1 year, get another get defensive stud or wide receiver, whoever they get in next year's draft, get them in. And maybe that's what they maybe trying to look at that way. If they can just do bad again, allow the quarterback to sit for a year or two, learn from Keenum or Davis Mills. Not that's a great place to learn from, but do you think maybe that's what they're doing? Maybe they're looking at trying to get another first round pick next year to really, really boost their squad that way.
I just think, if you're, I don't know who. I mean, the favourite to be the number one pick now that the Panthers has got it is CJ Stroud. So it feels like that's very much the way it's going. In which case, they're taking Bryce Young. If that's what's going to happen, you're not sitting Bryce Young. You're not going to sit Bryce Young. He's clearly a very capable quarterback, and he's better than what his time in college. I think has shown that he can be a very, very good quarterback. I don't see them sitting a quarterback of that caliber coming out of college. I don't think the fan base will let them do it. It would be crazy. So I think because of that, it seems a strange move. I don't know. I've said this for a few years now with the Texans that they do weird things like this, and it doesn't make sense. A lot of it doesn't make sense, and I don't know what they're really trying to achieve by it. But yeah, it felt like they were the one that just. Like I say, I think sometimes everyone goes, "Oh, you've had a really bad free agency because you haven't brought anyone in," and sometimes that doesn't mean that it's that bad. I mean, you look at like the Chiefs; they've only brought in 3 players, so it's not that bad, and they're decent players as well. So it's like you just sort of think you don't have to bring in loads of players, but I mean they've brought in 11 or 12 players, and they're all just a little bit like, why? That's the problem. That's what you just look at them and you go, but why have you brought that player in? You're not really paying them that much. You've obviously got loads of holes in your team. That's why you're bringing in so many players. They're then going to have all their draft picks as well. They're bringing in loads of new players, and it just kind of feels all a bit strange. And a lot of them are 1 year, or they're 2 years, but then they can get out of them after the first year, and it just, to me, it feels strange knowing that you're probably going to go out and get yourself a young quarterback and you're not really helping him out much.
No, and especially with the size of Bryce Young that's been reported, I think he will definitely need as much protection as he can get because it sounds like he's nowhere near the size for an NFL player yet. Going back to the Raiders, I want to make a quick look. I think I agree with you. I think the Raiders had a terrible free agency, but I do think the Garoppolo thing isn't as bad. That's the one thing I don't mind because from everything you hear about Garoppolo, he's the model professional. He is someone that is a great teammate. Everyone loves him. And I think that I do believe still that the Raiders will get someone like Will Levis, 7th overall. I do think that's where it's going. And I think that they could easily just mention player sitting. I think Will Levis definitely needs time to sit. I don't think he's anywhere near being NFL ready. And I think that if you can have him behind Garoppolo for a year or two, I think that from what we've been reported, Garoppolo was always helping out Trey Lance, helping out Brock Purdy. And I think that he will be a great help. I think that will actually help him get jobs for the next 5 years. I think teams will use him as a bridge quarterback for a new rookie quarterback. And I think that Garoppolo will be a great example to set for, I think, for me, one of the best examples to set for any quarterback because he had the whole thing with, getting Trey Lance in, and he didn't moan. He kept playing. He kept going. I think that he is a great person to have. So I think they may use him in that sense. I think that's rather than Derek Carr, who obviously who came out and spoke of his frustration. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo ever did that at San Francisco. So I think in that sense, I can see him still getting Will Levis, and I think he can sit behind Garoppolo for a year or two, gives Garoppolo a chance to start. he does win games, even though it's a Shanahan system. I think McDaniels is a terrible head coach, and I think that so I think that's the only part I like. But everything else, I think getting rid of Dan Waller just seems wild, especially for a third-round pick. And as well, I got to shout out the Rams. A trade I loved, of course. Jalen Ramsey comes to the Dolphins. A third-round pick and Hunter Long for a 28-year-old. It just seemed like they could get a bit more for that from him. But I think they also had a bad year. But they're also like the Buccaneers. They're also a team that's gone all in, won the ring, and they're looking just to rebuild. So yeah, exciting times ahead in the NFL. But that is where we will end this episode. So first of all, huge thank you again, Adam, for coming on this week.
Sorry?
Did that come through? Can you
just went quiet. Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, I'll start again. I didn't. Right, I'll start again. And a huge thank you to Adam for coming on this week. What's in the pipeline for you, Adam, this week? Anything coming up on the franchise tag? You mentioned before XFL players. You mentioned an NFL player coming on. Can you break the news who that player is, or is that still a huge secret?
I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you. See, I'm not doing it, so they'll get stroppy if I let them know. But I'll give you a clue. It's a Bengal.
Ooh, okay. So you got one in chance. I hope I'll WhatsApp Gareth. If it is Joe Burrow, I'll try and tell Gareth to tell him that he needs to be less cocky than he is right now, because I expressed on a podcast many times that I'm not a fan of his personality. So yeah, I'm intrigued. I was hoping it'd be I'm gonna put a guess out there. So I'm gonna guess. Who can I get a guess? I would say Jesse Bates, but he's gone now. Another good addition to the Falcons. I'm gonna go for. I was gonna say P Ryan, but he's gone as well. I'm gonna go for Tyler Boyd.
No, I'm afraid not. It's a little bit above our station, I think. But yeah, you're not far off from the first guess, but that's as far as you're getting.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm very intrigued who that's going to be, and I'll try and get out of Gareth on the WhatsApp chat, and I'll see what he says. But yeah, that has been the Across the Pod podcast. This has been Andy. This has been Adam, and we will see you guys next time.